Minister, you need to get the message here tonight that you're not a bystander or a commentator in these matters. You're the shareholder on behalf of Joe and Mary Public, the citizens of this state. There have been many proposals put forward in relation to what should be done. Sinn Féin, for my part, for the last over 2 years, and our party and my predecessor Michael Kilreevy has put forward many sensible proposals in terms of expansion of services, community banking, co-location. We've been very open in terms of recognising the need for flexibility and the need for change. But in regard to the government amendment, you call it for the government services to stay in the network, which is not given the additional services as recommended, such as motor tax renewals, rates payments, etc. You've ignored this. And you also call for additional service to ensure the viability. You said that nearly all of the Kerr report, 17 out of 19 of the recommendations have been implemented. I have some of them here in front of me that shows that hasn't been done. Network renewal, basic payment account, motor tax, financial services strategy, credit unions, with the exception of a pilot scheme. So, despite the commitment in the programme for government, that hasn't happened. The political will has been lacking, and this is the key issue here. The government proposal in your amendment also calls to ensure that post service offers are appropriate where the 159 are returned, and also calls for the potential for co-location. I take it then that the government also questioned the current criteria. Now, the issue of retirement, and this is something a point I made today to you, the issue of retirement should not equal closure. Because somebody is retiring from a business or from a job doesn't mean you close down the factory, doesn't mean you close down anything. So, that's just a convenient way of doing it. The definition of a settlement, I want to revisit this with you. This thing of the 500 population settlements. What about Geishel in County Offaly? What about the town of Geishel? The town of Geishel has 500 citizens living within its environs, very close to it. Moneygall, Ballybrittis in County Laois. Moneygall, down on the tip of the southern tip of Offaly, on the borders with Tipperary. That needs to be looked at again. That's 3 for closure. And if you're extending the deadline to October the 31st, what happens to the post offices that are due to close before then? What about those that have already been closed, Minister? In County Laois alone, you have Ballinhill, Ballybrittis, Cretty Yard or something with Carlow. It's actually in County Laois, but we won't split hairs on that. Offaly, you have Geishel, Moneygall, Mount Lucas, Pulla and Welsh Island. They're all substantial communities, and it's going to be a huge loss to them. You have not committed to community banking. What you're proposing to do is to use the post offices. The banks have withdrawn from rural Ireland, and what you want to do is to allow the pillar banks to use the post offices to provide limited services, but the pillar banks withdraw the profit out of them. The pillar banks that we bailed out. What we need to be doing is putting in place either the Sparkson model or the Kiwi Bank model, where the profits are reinvested in the local community or in government services in rural areas, such as happens they have the option of that in New Zealand. And the case of the Sparkson model can be used directly by local government in regions of Germany. The whole process of reform, of reform of the post office network, it's like watching paint dry. It's been a bit like a sort of a slow bicycle race over the last 7 years. It has been grinding on and grinding on. The committee was talking about this, the Dáil committee, back in the last term of the Dáil Éireann, that Dáil term. And, it has just been grinding on since then, whereas, I have to agree that, there has been inaction for decades on this, but there was clearly a need for quick action on this in the years, 12, 13 and 14. There needed to be quick action. And that hasn't happened. But here we are now still watching this slow bicycle race taking place. What we need to be doing is, and we're looking at here 159 definitely closing and one more mentioned tonight. There's the possibility and the likelihood of another 230 that haven't been offered a new contract. This is affecting the most marginalised rural communities. But the thing to remember, Minister, it's actually affecting the most marginalised people within those communities, those people who are elderly and those people who are on the smallest incomes. That's who it's going to hit hardest. And I've heard people saying, they can get a taxi or they can, do a round trip to a post office within 15 kilometres. That's the first €30 gone out of a pensioner's income, 25 or 30 euros for a taxi. And that has to be borne in mind here. And also bear in mind that people over 70 are now having huge difficulty getting car insurance. So a lot of elderly people in rural areas that I know no longer can drive. You need to get a hands-on approach on this. You're not a bystander in it. You're representing the public on this. You are the shareholder, the sole shareholder. You need to get a grip on this and stop these closures.